Good afternoon, and welcome to the fourth concurrent session of the day, Teaching HyFlex Math, Providing Students with More Options. Our presenter today is Dr. Latrice Bowman from University of Alaska Fairbanks. Dr. Latrice Bowman has lived in Alaska for about 35 years and enjoys the challenges and experiences that come with living there. She has been teaching and working at the University of Alaska Fairbanks for a little over 20 years. 15 of those have been with online and distance education. Dr. Bowman has a master's in applied mathematics and a doctorate in online education. She has taught almost every undergraduate mathematics course, and many of those have been online. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Latrice Bowman, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my presentation here. This is teaching a HyFlex course, mostly math courses, and mostly I'm going to talk about how to go about setting them up and delivering these. Before I get too far in this presentation, I do want to just mention that I'm fairly new to this, so I figured it would be good to kind of share what I've been through so far and what I've seen and kind of go from there. So here's kind of my agenda. She's already talked a little bit about me. I'll mention just a few more things, but then I'll get up into HyFlex, what and why, some of the benefits and challenges I've seen so far, the setup and delivery, and then what's next for us. Most of this she has already mentioned. A couple of things I want to add to that is what I've done in my classes can be done through many different platforms. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Hawks and Gradescope and my math lab, but this really works with many platforms. Our university also uses Google for our email, and we also have a Google Classroom set up, but we also use Blackboard. I've used Canvas. So this can work in many different LMSs and online platforms. One of the reasons I am looking at HyFlex is I am often teaching multiple sections of courses. And by multiple sections, I'm thinking not just asynchronous online, but also in person. And as I mentioned, I'm kind of new to HyFlex teaching. So what is HyFlex? So some of you have probably been more familiar with this than I am, but what I am learning is that HyFlex is multimodal learner choice. Basically what that means is your students can have the option of in-person, synchronous, or asynchronous delivery. And they can choose this not just by the course level. They can choose it either daily, weekly, by topic, or as they feel. And then the activities within the course need to be equivalent to the learning outcomes. So we don't want to change things up drastically from one mode to another, but we want to make sure that everybody is getting equivalent learning experiences. Okay. Some of the things I've noticed so far is that the materials that we can use, we create them once and then modify them for the different modes of learning. We don't have to start from scratch each time. We want the participation to be accessible to all students. And what I mean by that is some of the things that we do in class, in person, group activities, discussions, things like that, we want to make sure that it's available to all of the different modalities.
I apologize for the technical difficulties. It looks like Dr. Bowman was pulled out. It might have been a connection issue. Hopefully we can get her back in here soon. Give us one moment.
That, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you now. Welcome back.
Sorry, it looks like our internet is not great right now. Hopefully, let's see if we can share again, and I'll kind of pick up right where I feel like I got cut off. I don't know if you can see my screen again.
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize for that. I kind of got cut off right when I was talking about why we were looking at HyFlex. And so part of why we were looking at HyFlex is because we were already teaching in multiple modalities. We wanted to keep the flexibility for our students. Because we couldn't offer in person, we were doing the synchronous online, but we found that we were having a lot of students call in and say, well, I can't meet at that time because these weeks I have to work and these weeks I've got this. So we wanted to make sure that we kept that flexibility in there. Also with that, we saw that we were reducing the attendance and participation issues in our online classes when we were offering them more synchronously, which we kind of expected. The other thing that comes out of this is we were able to provide extra time for students who needed it. So even though we're offering the same things across the board, it made it so students who were kind of struggling didn't feel like they were pressured to get it in that 1 hour class time. The other reasons we started looking at HyFlex is because we had some reductions in department resources. When COVID hit, some of our grad students weren't able to return, and we had a couple of faculty who did not come back. And so we were still planning to offer courses and wanted to condense the number of sections. So instead of offering 2 sections of the same class, we're offering 1 section with the different modalities. Okay. And like I said, we had to meet some of the classroom restrictions. For us, most of our math classes are about 30 students. And with the COVID restrictions, it would take it down to about 6 or 8. And that just wasn't doable with the size of our department. So some of the benefits that we've been finding for our HyFlex classes. One of them is that so one of the benefits is that we are having better participation in the classes. Sorry, I just got a chat that said my video isn't showing. I don't think I have the access to let it start again. It keeps telling me that it's not allowed. Students feel that they have a say in their learning. They can, again, adjust according to their schedule. We are seeing better instructor interaction with the students. And so this is partly because before it was all asynchronous. Now you have some of that synchronous in there, so they have a better feel of who their instructor is. In our asynchronous classes, sometimes we used to get reports that students at the end of the course didn't even know their instructor name, which we now don't have as much of a problem with that. Also, this is giving us more offerings to the students. So like I said, we didn't have to cut some of those classes. We are, so why is it not sharing? Can you see the PowerPoint now?
unable to see the PowerPoint.
Okay, sorry, I saw in the thing that someone couldn't see the PowerPoint. Okay.
Okay.
Um, for the other reason we feel this is a benefit is, again, we have fewer resources. We get the same number of students that we had before, but we still get that small class feel. So what I mean by that is typically we would teach an in-person section with about 25 students and an online section with about 35 students. And now we have one class where the in-person is probably about 15 to 20 students, but we still have about 50 students in the class. So you get that larger class, but it's a smaller class size field. You still get some of that individual attention that students were looking for. Some of the challenges we found. So this first challenge is one that I would say was true of any online class, and that's keeping the asynchronous students engaged and on track. I do feel that this is a little less of a challenge with the HyFlex, just because I think the nature of the HyFlex is making it so that we are in more contact with the students. Tracking attendance, and I put a star by that because I want to come back to that. This is definitely a challenge when you've got students switching modalities from day to day. So keeping track of who's coming synchronously or in person versus who's going to be doing things asynchronously is definitely a little bit of a challenge. The class and peer-to-peer interactions can be difficult. And this, I think, varies from course to course and just by the dynamic of the students. Last semester, I had one class where I had a bunch of introverts, and many of the students just, you could not get them to talk to each other for the life of you, even in the group sessions. And so that is still something that we're working on. And I think that's just going to be a natural challenge depending on the classes. This semester, I have very, very interactive classes. The students almost all have their cameras on when they're in the Zoom sessions. They're always asking questions, and the group discussions, I usually have to cut them off. So it does differ from semester to semester and from course to course. The other thing I put a star by is juggling the different needs of the in-class versus the remote learners. I put a star by this one because right now we are kind of doing HyFlex. We don't have that in-person portion just yet. We'll be starting that this summer and fall. But like I said, right now we've been doing the synchronous and asynchronous together. And so it will be interesting to see kind of the challenges that come from the in-person being there as well. And we, like the next piece says, we have technology that we're going to have to use for that. Technology can be a challenge both for the students and the instructors. For the students, we basically start the class one day or one period of the class to just go over all the technology, because for a lot of students, even though they've used some of this stuff before, they may be using it in a new way or having to interact with it differently than they have before. And on the instructor side, we have what we call the meeting owl. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but that's the thing we'll be using in person to kind of capture what's going on in the classroom, as well as doing the synchronous and the recording. And so for us, it's, for some of us, it's kind of a new technology. So setting up the HyFlex course, I put advertising as the #1 because for us, this was the biggest challenge, getting the word out there to the students, to the advisors, making sure people knew what they were registering for. We don't have a HyFlex course option set up in our banner system. And so what it means is we are still listing 3 different sections of a course, but they're all one section. And so we had to come up with a way to make this known to students and let them know what they're registering for and let them know about the options. It also means that as we go through the semester, we have to remind the students about it because it's new to them as well. For the course design, what we did for the ones we did last semester and this semester, we basically treated them as asynchronous courses with substantial support. So the synchronous sessions, the lectures, whatever you want to call them, we're adding those in We want to keep all the resources that we had before, and we want to make sure that the learning outcomes are still there. So we started with the outcomes, treated just like we built our normal asynchronous courses, and then dealt with the modality. So once we had our learning outcomes and our activities and figured out what we want the students to do, then it's figuring out how to make it equitable between the different the modes. Tracking the attendance and participation. I have a whole slide on this because I think this is kind of important about how we think about that. Like I mentioned earlier, reuse the course materials, don't reinvent the wheel. I didn't want to make big changes from what we're doing in class to what we're giving the students in the asynchronous or vice versa. We want to make sure that whatever I'm doing in class is the same type of learning activity the students in the asynchronous are getting. And so that's making sure things are accessible and equitable. Accessible because we also have students who are in low bandwidth areas, and we want to make sure that they are able to see the videos, access the online quizzes, or whatever else we're doing in the course. So advertising, I'm just going to put this up here. I know there's lots of words on this slide, but basically this is what we did for our advertising inside of our scheduling system. So when students go to register, they get a big blurb when they go and look at the courses that we're offering HyFlex. So by each of the sections, they get this. And again, when they're talking with advisors and they're talking about, hey, I want to take essential pre-calculus, or I want to take pre-calculus, then the advisor will talk to them and say, hey, this is being offered in this way. What this means to you is this. If you have questions, please talk to the instructor. And so we are fielding a little bit more questions and comments before students are registering, but I think as we do this more, that will dwindle down some. Okay. All right, so the attendance versus participation. This was a big thing for us when we were looking at our HyFlex, because we have always been asked to track attendance for various reasons. Financial aid, needs to know the last time a student attended the class. We have a lot of military students on the GI Bill, and so they need to know, if the student failed, when was the last day they were active in the course. And so we need to know when the students are there. But from my perspective as the instructor, that's not the most important thing to me. A student can certainly come to class, sit in the class, and never get anything out of it. And so instead of, are they attending class, I want to know, are they participating in the course? And so by participation, I looked at it in 4 pieces. For many math classes, there's a math textbook that you're expecting the students to read. Now, not all of them are going to read it. They can get this information in many different ways. So even though I'm calling this reading, what I'm looking for is, do they understand what the concepts are? So if we're looking at quadratic equations, do they understand what a vertex is? Do they understand what the axis of symmetry is? Things like that. Do they have kind of that basic understanding of what we're trying to get across? The lecture, and I put this in quotes because I'll talk about this too. This is where I want to do some guided practice. I'm going to kind of reiterate those important concepts, but I kind of want to walk them through some things and let them try it out and see how they're doing and get them a chance to ask questions. The practice is where the students can get their understanding mastered. So they get instant feedback, they can try things over and over. This is usually done for us through some online homework. And then there's the assessment part of it, them showing me what they understand and what they don't. And so can they analyze, communicate, evaluate, graph, etc. Okay. And so when I'm looking at participation versus attendance, these are the things I want to be able to track. Can they do the readings? Can they lecture? Can they do the practice? Can they do some form of assessment? Okay. So for our lecture, these are our class meetings. Now, right now, we have 3 of our courses that are doing this synchronous and asynchronous HyFlex model. One of them is the pre-calc class, just a regular STEM-based pre-calculus. We have an essential pre-calc, which is our business and kind of non-STEM students. And then we have Numbers in Society, which is a liberal arts math class for non-science, some of our non-BA majors. And so for 2 of those classes, they typically meet 3 days a week for 1 hour each day. The pre-calc, the STEM-based pre-calc usually meets 5 days a week. And so here I'm talking more along those 3-day-a-week classes. Again, the meetings are usually about an hour. And so what we've done for these is we broke them up into smaller pieces. Now, giving some preface to this, like I said, we started with our asynchronous course and then added to it. So most of our asynchronous courses already had short 10-minute kind of introduction videos built in. And so the students have done the reading, they've watched these 10-minute videos, and now they're going to come into class. And so what we do is we start out with just a quick 5-minute, I call it a quiz, but it's really just a quick poll question, or we'll have a quick activity that they can look at something and kind of relate it to what we've done previously. Then we get into one of the concepts from the reading or the video. We can talk about it, we'll go over it, stress the importance, give some examples, usually 1 or 2, just depending on how long they are. And then we do kind of a group activity. And this group activity doesn't necessarily need to be done in groups. It can be individual. Some of these problems we will let students choose whether or not they want to be in a group. And this is quick. Like I said, it's 10 minutes. We're in Zoom, so we open up the breakout rooms. They can join a breakout room, do a quick question. We come back together, do a quick reflection on it. Were there questions on this? Did anybody have problems with this? Then we go back into the lecture, okay? And we kind of repeat that for the hour. The last 5 minutes, we usually do like an exit question or a reflection. So, hey, this is what we learned today. Or, give me a quick feedback. How did this go for you? What are some questions you have? What did you find really difficult? Just some sort of kind of closing to it. Here I say allow for questions as you go. I don't really have set aside time for questions, but we build it in as we're moving through these sections. So every time we're doing an example in class, we're always asking the students, letting them unmute and ask questions. In the reflections within the activities is a great time. That's usually when most of the questions come out, because they'll look back over it and they're like, hey, I didn't get that, or I really got that, but I don't understand this. This is where we get kind of that feedback. And in that 3-day-a-week setup, like I said, we usually do 2 of these classes where we're doing kind of this lecture activity component, and then 1 day is just set aside for review. It's mostly a question answer type thing. Students can bring questions. I will bring problems from the online component that I saw that a lot of students had problems with. And students who are doing this asynchronously can bring in discussion questions as well. And so we post everything we do in this in a discussion so that the students can see it later. Okay. So equitability between the different modalities. So looking at the different assignments. So I'm going to start with the lectures because I think these are the easiest ones for us. Our university has Zoom set up in our LMS, which is Blackboard. And so anytime we set up a Zoom class meeting, it is automatically, the links are automatically given to the students. It makes a recording of the session for us and it automatically posts it in our Blackboard. So for us, that's kind of automated. Where this becomes unautomated is when I want to enter those quizzes or the activities that we're doing. So I want to make sure I'm providing students with the asynchronous resources. Those are the short videos I mentioned beforehand, and all of those are posted in the LMS. The activities that we do in class are usually in the form of polls or Google Forms, and it just depends on the need for the math editor. So neither one of them has a great math editor. I'll start with that. But I do want to kind of just pull one up and show it real quick, so you can see what I'm talking about. So I don't know if you guys can see the Google screen there. So here's just a quick example of one of the problems that I would do in one of my calc classes where they just learned about derivatives. They've talked about the difference between the first derivative and second derivative. And so this would be a quick conversation problem that they would do. And so in one of those, we've looked at the graph of a derivative and how it relates to the function. And then we would break out into the groups, and here's what they would see. And so the group would work together. They would talk about, well, this is where I think it's increasing, and someone else would come in and do something different. This is just a Google form. The nice thing about this is I can add points to it. So when the students go in and they put their information in and they submit it, it's an Excel spreadsheet that I can put in for participation credit. And the other nice thing is I can link this to the recordings. And so when the asynchronous students are watching it, they can pause at that point when we did the activity, come in and do this activity, and they still get the points for it. And like I said, it's some of them are poll questions that I do, and then I'll just make that a short Kaltura video quiz. But if it's something where I need images or I need equations or things like that, then I'll usually do a Google form. Okay. So, and like I said, I can insert those in the videos if need be, but typically I'll just post the link for them in there. Okay. For the assignments, we have two types of assignments because, again, it's a math class and I want to make sure the students are not only getting all of the conceptual part of it, I want to make sure they can communicate the math well. So we still have the online and the written. The online assignments are usually very short. These are done through Hawks or my math lab. For our upper division courses, we're using WebWork or Affinity. We do have some that are in WebAssign. I'm not teaching any of those, but the ones I teach are there. And like I said, they're usually short quizzes. The students can try them over and over and they get some instant feedback. And it's, like I said, a practice and mastery. They can spend more or less time as needed. So students who've got a good handle on it can kind of go through it quickly. For those who are having a little difficulty, they get more practice as needed. They're available 24/7. I usually have these posted the first day of class. And like I said, the students get instant feedback, so they know whether they're getting it right or wrong. For the written assignments, we usually do about one per week. We've been using Gradescope. And when I say we, it's not everybody in the department, but me and the other faculty member who are doing these HyFlex courses have been using Gradescope for a while. When I was doing in person, I used Gradescope. I like Gradescope because it does make it easy for everybody to do the same thing. All of the written assignments are posted in there. The students have access to them. When their assignment is graded, they can go in and see what the comments were, and they have access to that all semester. So there's no more losing assignments. There's not multiple ways, multiple drives or things like that where students are housing things. And it makes grading very easy. I can actually check their notation. I can check that they're writing things out correctly. And so these are not going to be just simple calculations. These are usually going to be more of those conceptual problems that they have to kind of think out and write things out. And like I said, it makes it nice for all the students to get the same assignment. So both of those, everybody is looking at exactly the same thing. Okay, so the last part of this is the assessments or the exams. One of the questions I'm always asked when I talk about any of my online classes and their exams is, well, what do you do about student cheating? And for the most part, I would say I don't have a big problem with that. Part of it is, I think we're giving more lower stakes exams. So when we used to do these courses in person, it was usually 1 or 2 midterms and a final. And so they were really kind of high pressure for the students. And I have lots of students with math anxiety. So it was always kind of a stress point for them. For these courses, we've been doing a lot more lower stakes. So for example, in our Numbers in Society, which is our liberal arts class, we don't even call them exams, they're quizzes. They have one every week, it's 30 minutes, so they are timed. And the students don't feel as stressed because there's so many of them. For the pre-calc classes, I have about 6 of them, so it's about every 2 weeks they get them. They are hour-long. I would call them regular exams, but again, because there are multiple of them, the students don't feel quite as stressed out about them. They do sign a code of conduct statement at the beginning of each of these, and they have to turn it in with their assessment. As I said, they're timed. So in Gradescope, we post the template for them. It's usually just a PDF of the problems, and then the students will go and write it out on their own paper. And then they have to digitize it and upload it. Because they are timed, we do give a deduction if students go over the time limit. Part of that is if the time expires, they can't turn it into Gradescope, so they have to email it to me. But it gives them a chance to keep going on it even if they run out, and then turn it in. So it's not like they're getting a 0, but they do get a little bit of a deduction. And the nice thing about Gradescope is my students with accommodations, it lets me put that in there. So if someone is getting time and a half, I don't have to adjust that, manually. I can put it in once for the course and it will adjust it automatically for the students. Most of these, I do less calculations and more conceptual checks. So what does that mean? In pre-calc, for example, they're going to be asked to solve equations. I'm going to do that more on the homework. In the exams or these assessments, I'm looking more for, can they explain things? Can they decipher when a certain algorithm or method is used more than others? And so there are going to be some calculations, but not as many. It's more conceptualized, and it is heavily credit supported. So if they're not showing a lot of work, or they don't show any work, and they just give me a yes, no answer, or they try to give me a short answer without an explanation, they get less credit. And I stress that to them at the beginning of the course. All of the exams are posted for the day. So right now, like I said, we're just doing the asynchronous and synchronous. We don't have any in-person. So we post the exam for the day. When the student goes into Gradescope, once they open it, that's when their time starts. They don't have access to the template until they open it. And so they can take it whenever it's convenient for them. For when we start the in-person, we'll also add an in-class time slot for that. So students who want to come in person and do the exam, they can do it there. For our classes with final exams, we do proctor those through Zoom. It's pretty much the same setup. The only difference is for the final, the students have their camera on them and their space. And again, it's just making sure that we have that one final check. And like I said, it's for those classes with a final exam. Our pre-calc, our calc, the ones that go on to another class. Okay, so as I mentioned before, student contact is one of those things that we had a little difficulty with our asynchronous students. And here are some things that we've been trying out to increase the interaction. And I would say for those who've seen one of my previous webinars, these things have definitely helped. So we do require some initial contact. And what that means is all of the students in the first couple of weeks of the class are asked to make a 15-minute appointment with us. And it's usually just a quick touch base. I want to get to know you. Give me one interesting thing about yourself. How are you doing in the course so far? Have you found all of the materials? Do you have any questions about the technology, et cetera, et cetera? The biweekly check-ins, mostly this is just a quick way for me to touch base with the student with how I think they're doing in the course without giving a whole bunch of information. And then, of course, there's always emails, phone calls, video messages, things like that. And then instead of having just regular office hours, we do student appointments. So they can make appointments with me during whatever time is most convenient for them within reason. I have, hours, I usually set aside about 12 hours a day. Obviously, I'm not working all of those, but then it gives the students who are not in my time zone a little bit more flexibility.
I apologize for the interruption. I want to give a 10-minute notice to allow question and answers at the
Okay, so this is my last slide, and I'll just let people read it if you want. Like I said, we're just going to be adding in person, hopefully adding some additional classes. But that's what's next for us. We're just going to try and expand this because it's been working well so far. And hopefully we can continue expanding it to all of our course offerings. So questions.
So we do have a couple of questions. The first question, well, would you say that HyFlex is sort of like a hybrid, except it's all online, whereas some can meet as a group at one time and others cannot?
So for us right now, I would say yes. I would say for HyFlex as a whole, at least from what I've heard from other people I've talked to at other universities who are doing this more than what we're doing, it really is giving more flexibility to the options. So a student who would normally be sitting in person for the entire semester, they can switch over into an asynchronous portion at any time they want or meet synchronously. One of the reasons I really like this HyFlex is because we have students who are 2 on, 2 off up at the slopes, and before they could only do asynchronous courses because we had this in-person requirement. And so now we have it where they can do 2 weeks synchronously with us and then 2 weeks out at the slope asynchronously. And so it works, it just gives them more flexibility.
The next question, the advertising was added as an annotation in your scheduling. Is that correct?
Yes, and we also just kind of include it wherever we can. So it's also on our math lab website. It's on our department website. Like I said, we give it out to the advisors. Anytime students have a question about one of those courses that's offered that way, we throw it in there.
And the next question, does GradeScope cost anything to the students?
No. As far as I know, they do have a free license, so you as an instructor can sign up for their free one. It doesn't have all of the beta stuff that they're working on, but if you sign up, you can add students to it and by email, and then they can post their answers and whatnot. If your institution purchases a license, then you get all of the beta stuff that they're working on and any updates and all of that. So it's slightly different versions of it, but as far as I know, it's completely free to the student.
The next question, do you have any ways to address the use of apps to get the completed work on problems?
So I assume they are talking about like the ones where they can take a picture of an equation and it'll solve them for them. If that is what they're asking about, I would say I'm not as worried about that because the only places the students are going to see those types of problems are in the online homework and the written homework. They're not going to see any of those on the assessments. And so if they're using one of those repeatedly, when they get to the assessment, they are going to have some troubles.
The next one, do you do the timed assessments on the review day?
The assessments are actually built in as a class day, so no. Sometimes that review day is the session before. Sometimes the assessment would fall on what we'd call just a regular lecture day, but it's built into the schedule.
Are there any other questions at this time? We still have a few minutes left for questions. I do see that someone just reached out for a copy of the PowerPoints. Dr. Bowman, is it okay if we provide a copy of the PowerPoints for one of the attendees?
Yes, actually, I can probably do that now.
And we did have another question come in. How did you adjust section cap size, and were there any concerns about instructor credit load? That is, a section with an in-class cap of 30 becomes 50.
That is a great question. That is one of the things we are still working out. So right now, so my asynchronous classes before had cap sizes of 50. I would say we usually got about 35 to 40 students. The courses I am teaching right now, typically we had an in-person section with about 25 students and an online section with about 40 students. I currently have about 60 students in that class right now. And right now it is still counting as 2 classes because that's how it is in our banner system, and we don't have a way to override that yet. We're still working on that. For summer, what they're going to do is the in-person, because we're still COVID distancing and we can only have, I think it's 12 students in the room. We're doing a section with 12 students in person. We are doing 20 synchronous and 30 asynchronous. And what they're doing as far as workload is it's going to be time and a half. So if it was normally a 3 credit, they would give me 4.5. I don't know if that's the right solution. We're still figuring it out because we've only been doing these for 2 semesters. So we're still learning.
Are there any other questions? We have just a couple more minutes.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat for the, oh, I guess I should have got a shorter link. Oh, well, I'm sorry. There's a link for the slides for anybody who's interested. Oh, I guess I sent that to just the panelist. There we go.
Go through next time. Okay. So it looks like we don't have any other questions. Dr. Bowman is sending the link for the PowerPoints to everyone. So if you have any questions, she did provide her email as well at the end of the PowerPoint session. So you can reach out to her via email. Great. So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Bowman, for sharing that valuable information with us today. I'm going to launch a quick 3-question poll just over the presentation for you to share your feedback. If you have any questions, like I mentioned before, just let us know.
Thank you.
And then our next concurrent session will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can view the chat session for the meeting room links, as well as the conference website link. On the conference website link, you can see a list of our concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to our Hawks team. View a quick 5-minute demonstration and be entered to win the hourly drawing and giveaway. It's going to include your choice of a smart pen, standing desk, or $100 Amazon gift card.